At exactly 10:23 p.m. last night, sensors buried in the Pacific seafloor registered a shift that should not have happened for another year. The summit of Axial Seamount, sitting in complete darkness beneath a mile of ocean, had swollen to the breaking point, 95% inflation, the same deadly threshold that preceded its 2015 eruption. But the clock that was supposed to tick toward late 2026 has suddenly started racing. Magma pressure beneath the seafloor is building at unprecedented rates. What should have been a gradual approach to eruption has become a sprint toward geological catastrophe. And while this volcano remains invisible to the surface world, its next move could trigger consequences that reshape the Pacific coastline. The terrifying reality is that Axial Seamount does not erupt alone. It is part of the Juan de Fuca Ridge system, the same tectonic engine that feeds the Cascade Range. From Mount Baker to Mount Shasta, every major volcano in the Pacific Northwest draws power from the same underground network. When Axial finally breaks, the energy release could propagate through interconnected magma chambers, like electrical current through a circuit. So what happens when the most monitored underwater volcano in history finally reaches its breaking point months ahead of schedule? Why are scientists who predicted its last eruption now admitting they do not understand the new timeline? And if the Pacific Northwest Geological Foundation is more interconnected than anyone realized, what other disasters could this single underwater explosion trigger? 300 miles off Oregon's coast lies a volcanic mountain that most Americans have never heard of, yet it ranks among the most active and dangerous in North America. Axial Seamount rises 3,600 feet from the ocean floor, its summit still concealed beneath nearly a mile of crushing Pacific pressure. This is not just another underwater hill, it is a geological monster connected to the same magmatic system that fuels the Cascade volcanoes. Unlike the explosive stratovolcanoes on land, Axial sits directly atop the Juan de Fuca Ridge, a spreading center where new oceanic crust forms. Here, magma wells up continuously from the Earth's mantle, building a massive volcanic edifice the size of Mount Rainier. The volcano does not just erupt occasionally, it inflates and deflates like a colossal subterranean lung, breathing molten rock in and out on a semi-predictable schedule. Dr. Bill Chadwick, an Oregon State University geologist who has studied Axial for decades, explains the pattern. The volcano will inflate to about the same level each time before an eruption is triggered. But that consistency, which allowed Chadwick's team to successfully forecast Axial's last eruption in 2015, has suddenly evaporated. Now the inflation that should have taken years is happening in months. The magma is surging. The cycle is breaking down. July 29th, 2025. A massive 8.8 earthquake strikes off Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, unleashing seismic waves that race across the Pacific Basin at the speed of a jet airliner. 4,000 miles away, those waves converge on Axial Seamount. Pressure sensors on the seafloor go haywire, detecting the disturbance even through 1 mile of ocean. Within hours, earthquakes ripple through the volcano's magma chamber. Inflation rates double, then triple. Months later, in November 2025, a second blow strikes, this time from 2,400 miles south. A 7.9 earthquake hammers the Tonga Trench, generating a tsunami that sweeps across the South Pacific. Again, Axial shudders as the seismic waves arrive. Fresh lava erupts onto the seafloor, but it is just a prelude. By the end of the month, the volcano's inflation rate has quadrupled. What should have taken a year now happens in weeks. The final trigger strikes even closer to home. On December 8th, a swarm of earthquakes rattled the Blanco Fracture Zone, a fault system that slashes across the Juan de Fuca Ridge, just 60 miles from Axial. Seismographs on the summit recorded over 2,000 quakes in 24 hours, with a dozen reaching magnitude 4.0. It is the geological equivalent of a slow-motion hammer blow, and it shatters the pattern entirely. By December 20th, Axial's inflation topped 95%, the same level that triggered a massive eruption in 2015. But this time, it is happening 10 months early. To grasp why this acceleration is so alarming, we need to rewind the clock nearly a century. In May 1933, a United States Navy subchaser patrolling off Oregon's coast recorded something extraordinary in the ship's log. Awakened by a light at 0500, picked up several pieces of volcanic rock floating in the water, with gaseous bubbles coming from them. That log entry, lost for decades in naval archives, is the first known record of an eruption at Axial Seamount. Scientists now believe that the 1933 event was a submarine lava flow that poured across the seafloor, building a massive underwater plateau that covers an area larger than the city of San Francisco. But the true power of Axial's eruptive cycle remained hidden until July 1998, when seafloor seismometers recorded a massive seismic swarm. Over 8,000 earthquakes rattled the seamount in 11 days, with some powerful enough to resonate through the Earth's crust and reach monitoring stations as far away as Idaho. When a remotely operated vehicle visited the site months later, scientists discovered 10-mile-long lava flows blanketing the seafloor. Axial had unleashed a massive eruption. The pattern repeated in April 2011. After 13 years of steady inflation, Axial convulsed in another seismic swarm. This time, the earthquakes reached magnitudes up to 4.7. Seafloor monitoring equipment captured lava spilling from multiple vents, building new volcanic mounds towering 300 feet above the seafloor. The 2011 lava flows covered an area 3 times larger than the 1998 eruption. Then, in 2015, scientists witnessed Axial's power firsthand. On April 23rd, the volcano's inflation reached a critical threshold, prompting researchers to issue a warning. Axial would erupt before the year's end. That forecast proved chillingly accurate. On April 24th, seismic stations recorded a magnitude 5.2 earthquake, then went ominously silent as lava severed underwater data cables. The volcanic throat had reopened, spewing molten rock across the abyss. But even after 3 historic eruptions, no one truly grasped the implications of Axial's timing. Each event followed a clear pattern, with the volcano inflating gradually over 13 to 15 years before finally breaking open. Now, that pattern lies shattered. The eruption cycle that once stretched more than a decade has compressed to mere months, and the only force capable of that geologic high-speed rewind is Axial's deepening entanglement with seismic events across the entire Pacific. The haunting question is why? What's driving this sudden destabilization? The answer may lie in Axial's deepest structural roots. Beneath the mountain sprawls a network of subterranean dikes and sills, magma-filled cracks that can extend for miles through the oceanic crust. Those intrusions do not just feed Axial, they connect it to the rest of the Juan de Fuca ridge system. When the volcano erupts, it is not just releasing pressure from its own magma chamber. It is tapping into a vascular system of molten rock that ties it to every other volcano in the Pacific Northwest. Now imagine an earthquake strikes near one of those magmatic veins. The shaking dislodges mineral blockages, clearing the path for pent-up magma to flow rapidly upward. Suddenly, Axial's inflation does not just depend on gradual magma accumulation in its own chamber. It is taking a high-pressure injection from the entire network. That is exactly what scientists suspect happened in 2025. The Kamchatka quake, the Tonga rupture, and the Blanco fracture zone swarm. Each one hammered Axial's subsurface plumbing. uncorking bottlenecks, and mobilizing magma far beyond the seamount's footprint. Axial is not inflating anymore. It is being force-fed by seismic stress transferred across the entire Pacific basin. The consequences could be catastrophic. If Axial erupts on this accelerated schedule, it will not just reshape a patch of seafloor. It could destabilize the entire Cascadia subduction zone, a 600-mile-long fault capable of unleashing magnitude 9 megaquakes. Dr. William Wilcock, a University of Washington geophysicist, lays out a chilling scenario. He says Axial's eruption could trigger earthquakes up and down the subduction zone, not just by transmitting seismic waves, but by fundamentally altering the stress patterns and fluid pressures along the fault. Imagine the domino effect. Axial's lateral dikes and sills rupture, sending shockwaves racing through the Juan de Fuca plate's brittle crust. Those fractures weaken an already unstable fault system. The subduction interface could uncouple catastrophically, unleashing a magnitude 9.3 earthquake that hammers the Pacific coast from California to British Columbia. The Cascade volcanoes, their magma already mobilized by Axial's subsurface connections, could erupt simultaneously in a cataclysmic chain reaction. This isn't fantasy, it's the ultimate doom loop, a feedback cycle driven by seismic forces we're only beginning to understand. And it's the same cycle that may have devastated the Pacific Northwest long before recorded history. Core samples drilled from Pacific seafloor sediments contain layers of volcanic ash and turbidites, the signature of underwater landslides triggered by titanic earthquakes. Those layers appear in rhythmic pulses over the past 10,000 years. In other words, the catastrophe we're watching unfold around Axial Seamount may be an ancient pattern written into the Earth itself. Now, that pattern is shattering. What should have taken decades is unfolding in months. The Pacific Northwest's magmatic network is wired for catastrophe, and the volcano best positioned to light the fuse sits alone on the abyssal plains, 300 miles from the land it threatens to reshape forever. The most wired volcano in the world is screaming a warning. Are we listening? Will Axial's premature eruption stay buried beneath the waves, or shatter the Pacific Northwest as we know it? Drop your predictions below and subscribe, because we're just one breaking point away from the story of the century.